And if you look down, you'll find out that Stan got way ahead of himself before Easter. I thought I didn't have enough time, and evidently I had too much time. So we've covered a whole lot of things in here. So what I want to do tonight is, if you look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John up at the top of your sheet, you'll find out that Matthew and Mark talk more about Holy Week or Passion Week than the other two. Uh, John talked a little bit less than somebody, but John, as we said before, didn't try to add anything to what they were saying. But we find on this list to your left, we talked about Palm Sunday. Of course, this past Sunday was Palm Sunday. We talked about Jesus riding into Jerusalem and going into the temple, and then he come back out. That's something I didn't mention Sunday night that I wanted to wait till the night to mention. The question was, I wonder what Jesus saw when he went in that temple, because when he went in on Monday, you'll see he cleansed that temple. That's when he turned over the tables and run people out. But don't you think that Palm Sunday, of course, when we all know when he approached Jerusalem, that he wept over Jerusalem. We studied that too. And then he went in that temple. When he come back out, he went back to Bethany and spent the night in Bethany. I wonder what was on his mind that night. Now here he has rode in to Jerusalem with everybody hollering, Hosanna, Hosanna, and just waving them palm branches and laying the palm branches and coats it down on the ground. And here comes the king, the mighty king riding on a donkey. How many of you's ever seen the donkey with the cross on his back? All of them don't have it, but there's one breed of donkey that's got a cross on his back. It's the only animal in the world that's got a cross. And I think it's interesting, just the fact that here's a donkey, that's what Jesus rode in, the colt, and you've seen donkeys with crosses on their back. But anyway, I wonder what he was thinking that night when he got back to Bethany. Now, you got to realize that his days were 24-hour days just like yours are. So we get short stories. All through the Bible, we get short stories. We get what these writers told us about what happened at these particular times. And they're little short stories compared to a 24-hour day. But when Jesus got back to Bethany, he had walked in that temple. I think Jesus, this is me, I think Jesus sitting there thinking about what I just saw. What I just saw, and he had to think about that all night long, what was going on in the house of God. In God's house, that's what the temple was. It was supposed to be a holy place. It's where they went to make sacrifices, and they were using it for a Sears Roebuck, Belt Tyler's store, and open air market and different things, selling, buying in the temple, in the courts of the temple too. But Monday morning when he gets up after all that happened, we talked about the fig tree. He walked by the fig tree. It didn't have any figs on it, so he put a curse on that tree. A lot of people said he cursed the tree. Well, they said, well, he talked ugly to it. No, he put a curse on the tree. And then he went back in that temple. He'd had all night to think about this thing. And he went in that temple and he cleaned it out. This is God's house. He cleaned it out. We got a lot of churches today that need cleaning out. They need cleaning out completely and bring God's worship service back into their church, because this is a place you and I come to. You and I come here to worship. We come here to be a family. We don't come here for all the worldly things in the world. I know a lot of churches, and I'm not knocking them. Well, I am too. I can't say I'm not knocking them. I know a lot of churches that build gymnasiums, to draw the young people to come to their church. They put, sort of like when I was growing up, my mama could get me to do anything if she held an ice cream cone in front of me. She said, see this ice cream cone? You get this if you go do this. And I'm going to let you have the ice cream cone first. But it gave me something, That's the way a lot of churches are doing that. They're putting stuff out there to invite people. Instead of thinking about their heart, what's in here. their salvation, what they need, they are more, what I want to say, they're more interested in numbers. I'm not interested in numbers. I'm interested in souls. I'm interested in people's hearts. I'm interested, if you die tonight, where are you going? That's what we have to preach and teach. But anyway, Jesus went in there, and we'd already talked about that stuff. A whole lot of these, I'm going to tell you tonight, we've already talked about, so we're going to go through it pretty fast. He cleansed the temple, and then on your sheet it said the crowd's reaction. There's a whole lot. Mark 11, 18, and 19, and Luke 19, 47 and 48 talks a lot about that. And he left Jerusalem again on Monday. He left and went out. And then Tuesday morning, evidently he went back to Bethany because he was on the same trail. On Tuesday morning he comes back and there's the fig tree, and it's dead. I mean, as Jerry Clower used to say, graveyard dead. It was dead. And they noticed it, and they told Jesus about it. And then Sunday night we talked about the Greeks seeking Jesus, and we all know about the end time predictions, the Olivet Discourse and all that Jesus does. That brings us up to tonight. We're going to go real fast because I want to get all the way to almost to the end. But Wednesday night, there was a plot to kill Jesus, and your sheet here says Judas's betrayal agreement. Now, if you got a chronological Bible and you go in order, you find out that this Wednesday night is probably the time it happened, because a chronological Bible takes you right through day by day by day, and it's right in the middle of Wednesday. So I'm going to go along with the Bible and what they're writing about Judas's betrayal. And then on Thursday night, a lot of people have a service called Maundy Thursday, not Monday Thursday, Maundy. And that's the night that Jesus actually sat around with his disciples, had the Last Supper with them, washed their feet. Washed their feet. He also, during that time, told them a lot of things. He told them that night about his betrayal. Who was going to betray him? Who had really already betrayed him because he had already received the money, but he's still sitting at the table with them. He's still sitting there, and Jesus ate with him, washed his feet. So Jesus was a picture that nobody else could draw of love. That's what he was. Jesus was love. They had their Last Supper. He told Peter that he was going to deny him. Of course, Peter said, not me, not me, not me. But if you go on through that, John, I want to read something to you in your Bible. John 13:21. John 13:21. I'll give you a chance to get there because I want to read this to you. He said in John 13:21, when Jesus had said these things, he was troubled in his spirit and testified and said, most assuredly, I say to you, one of you will betray me. Then the disciples looked at one another, perplexed about whom he spoke. Who's he talking about? They're starting to look at each other. He said, one of you is going to betray me. Well, they don't know who's going to betray him. Even Judas, knowing in his heart that he's the one that Jesus is talking about, had to ask the question, is it me? Isn't that something? Somebody that's actually done it, already received the money, says, is it me? But these disciples were looking at one another, perplexed about whom he spoke. And it says, now there was leaning on Jesus' bosoms one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. We all know that's John. And then it says, Simon Peter therefore motioned to him, and he motioned to John and said, John, ask him who it was. Ask him who it is. We want to know. Then leaning back on Jesus' breast, he said, Lord, who is it? Lord, who is it? And Jesus answered, it is he whom I shall give a piece of bread when I have dipped it. And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Now, after the piece of bread, Satan entered him. Did you hear that? After the piece of bread, Satan entered him. Then Jesus said, what you do, do quickly. But no one at the table knew for what reason he had said this to him. For some thought because Judas had the money box, that Jesus had said to him, buy those things we need for the feast, that we should give something to the poor. And it says, having received a piece of bread, he went out immediately, and it was night. Jesus goes on to predict, let's see, yours, Peter's denial, just as good too. It said, so when he had gone out, Jesus said, now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him when? Immediately. And he calls, so here's one of the words that Jesus used a lot to his disciples. He called them little children. People say, well, why did Jesus call them little children? Most of them were teenagers. You know, that's what, when we look at a timeline, or when we look at a picture and go look at a picture of the Last Supper, we see all these old men or middle-aged men sitting around a table with Jesus. John probably 15, 16 years old at this time, or he was 15 when he started, so he might have been 18. But if you go back and look at their date of birth, a lot of them were teenagers. He calls them little children. What do you do to little children? Teach them. What has Jesus been doing for 3.5 years? Teaching them. Teaching them what he wanted them to know. He said a statement here that they did not understand. I shall be with you a little while longer. You will seek me. And as he said to the Jews, where I am going, you cannot come. Now I say to you a new commandment. He's given them a new commandment. There's 10 commandments out there, right? He can give them a new one right here. He says, love one another. What should a church be built on today? The members loving one another, taking care of one another, looking after one another, fussing with one another at times. What does children do anyway? I don't know how many children y'all have, but did you ever have any children that didn't fuss with each other? But when they got a little bit older, did you ever have any children that stood up for their younger brother or younger sister? Yes, they did. They looked after the young siblings. He said, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. Why? The Bible answers itself. Jesus is still talking. He says, by this all will know that you are my disciples. How will they know that you are my disciples? If you love one another. Does that mean if you don't love one another, you can't be my disciple? I would think so, because he just said right there, if you love one another, you're my disciples. Here comes Peter with his mouth. Lord, where are you going? You know, he just told him why he was going somewhere. Lord, where are you going? He said, where I'm going, you can't follow me, Peter. But you shall follow afterwards. Now, boy, these disciples, not only Peter, I think Peter was the first one that spoke, but they're getting real confused right now. What in the world is he talking about? Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you? I will lay down my life for your sakes. And look what Jesus told him. Will you lay down your life for my sake? Most assuredly, I say to you, the rooster shall not crow till you have denied me 3 times. What do you think Peter thought about that? What do you think in his mind? Mark told the story in chapter 14 of Mark 27 through 31, and you've got all this down there. But all of you will be made to stumble, is what Mark wrote, because of me this night. And then he gave scripture to back it up. Mark says, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. That's prophecy. And then Jesus said, but after I've been raised, I will go before you to Galilee. He's at a point right now, what does he mean by after I'm raised? What is it? They are clueless of what Jesus is talking about. Matthew said that in chapter 26 of Matthew, verses 31 to 35, he's told the same story. All of you will be made to stumble because of me this night. And he gave the same quote of Scripture. I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. And then he told also that he would go before them into Galilee. Matthew thought it important to write what Peter said again. He said, even if all made to stumble, I will never be made to stumble. And then, of course, Jesus told him what was going to happen to him. And even after he told him that you're going to deny me 3 times, Matthew adds right here in verse 35, Peter said to him, even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. Don't miss this last part in Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26, don't miss verse 35. Because we usually do. We usually stop right there when Peter said, even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. Now, Peter's been sentenced to the rooster crowing 3 times. But listen, the very last sentence in verse 35 says, and so said all the disciples. Don't miss that part. It won't just Peter that says, I'll never deny you. So said all the disciples. So Luke tells the story a little bit different in chapter 22, verses 31 to 38. Jesus looked at him and said, Simon, Simon, indeed Satan has asked for you that he may sift you as wheat. But I prayed for you that your faith should not fail. Now, this is something that a lot of people miss. Let me tell you where I'm at again. I'm in Luke chapter 22, verses 31 to 38. And Jesus is telling Simon Peter. First of all, I want you to notice in verse 31, did he call him Peter? The rock? He called him Simon, didn't he? Well, you know, a lot of times Jesus used phrases for Peter because Peter's foot was in his mouth half the time. Jesus used phrases like, if you go back to your old self, I'm going to call you Simon. Now, if you're going to go back and be brave and follow me and do what I tell you to do, your name's Peter, the rock. And sometimes you're in between, like my mom used to call me Stanley Gray. Sometimes he was Simon Peter. You know, so he was sort of in the middle there. But look what he said here, Simon, Simon. Back to your old self. He said, Satan's asked to sift you as wheat. He said, I prayed for you. That's very important. Remember what Jesus just said. He said, I prayed for you. Peter, I've been praying for you. Church, I've been praying for you. Disciples, I've been praying for you. Jesus was all the time praying. Here's the most important part of that verse, of verse 32. I prayed for you, right? You got that part? Look at the next. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. Jesus predicted Peter was going to deny him. Satan wanted to sift him. He was going to leave the faith. Jesus said, I prayed for you. And after I prayed for you, he says, not, and if you return, he says, and when. And when you return, Jesus already knew he was coming back. And when you return, strengthen your brethren. Take that part that you have gone through that has dug into your heart so deep and hurt you, the sin that you have done, and let it work so that you can come back and tell the disciples how to live. That's what Jesus was saying here. Of course, he told you, that went right over his head. He said, I'm ready to go with you both to prison and to death. And of course, Jesus told him again that he was going to deny him. Now, going real fast, I got caught on that longer than I wanted to, but he told the disciples that they would all flee that night, and of course, they all said they wouldn't never do it. And there was a lot of things that was going on here. One thing that a lot of people leave out, and John, if you look on your little sheet, it talked about the prediction of the disciples' flight. Jesus' intercessory prayer. Now, I preached on that maybe twice here since I've been here 9 years. John chapter 17, we talked about Jesus going and praying. He prayed, number one, for himself in chapter 17. Number two, he prayed for his disciples. And number three, it was a three-part prayer. He prayed for you. You weren't even born yet, but he prayed for you. And that's the same night that Jesus said that prayer for you, that he got. Here comes Judas with the army. Then we talked, and of course, like I said, I got way ahead of myself. We've already talked about his betrayal and arrest. We already talked about Peter cutting Malchus's ear off and Jesus putting it back. And we've also talked about the disciples, the flight. They left, they run, they scattered. Why is that important? It's important because God told them that's what they were going to do, and they didn't believe it. Go back and read those stories, especially the part at Gethsemane when he went to pray and he took Peter, James, and John with him, and they couldn't even stay awake long enough to watch. They all fell asleep 3 times. But then that was on Thursday night, around midnight or Friday morning early, maybe been 1 o'clock in the morning. Here they come. They arrested Jesus. One important thing in one of these stories, I don't know which one it was, but there was over 600 people that come to get Jesus. And I'm sure that some of the Pharisees were with the Roman soldiers. I'm sure some of the priests were with them. They were all against Jesus. And when they asked him, he said, ask him about who they were looking. He said, it's me. Here, it is I. And when he said that, they all fell down just from his voice. 600 people laying on the ground just from Jesus saying, you look at me, his voice. One day Jesus is coming back in the rapture, but when the millennium starts and he comes back on that white horse and he comes back to do war with the enemies against Israel, how's that war? The war going to be fought with guns and bombs? Nope. Tells us he's going to just speak and win the war just by his voice. And that kind of reminded me of that story. Now, where we want to go tonight is we talked a couple of Sunday nights ago. He went before Annas first, and Peter's first denial, and then his trial with Caiaphas, and then Peter's second denial, and then the trial before the Sanhedrin, and then Peter's third denial. And I've always said, and I always say it, and y'all might get tired of hearing it, but I just can see it. When he said that third time that he didn't know Jesus, that he cursed and said he didn't know Jesus, you don't know what you're talking about. The Bible tells us Jesus turned and looked at him, eyeball to eyeball. Now, some people think that Jesus did it in an ugly way. I think when Jesus and Peter's eyes met, Jesus smiled at him. I think he smiled at him. Not a I told you so, are you going to do it? But do you understand yet, Peter? Do you understand? And Peter went off and he wept bitterly. He's been through this trial. We got about 7 more minutes. We're going to do it real quick. Now listen to this. He went before Pilate. He had his trial. Judas went and committed suicide. And this trial went back and forth from Pilate to Herod. And then they wanted Jesus Barabbas, and the reason I'm not telling all of these, because we talked about them the last 3 or 4 weeks when I got way ahead of myself. But you can follow right through there, and what I want you to know that happened that night, and I'm not going to read the scripture, I'm going to just read this sheet over here, and then I'm going to touch on each one of them a little bit. Jesus got mocked by the soldiers. Now, these soldiers, you got to realize, are Roman soldiers, didn't have anything to do with religion, could care less. They were bloodthirsty Roman soldiers that wanted to kill somebody, but they knew they couldn't kill him. 39 lashes because 40 would kill you. A crown of thorns put on his head, spit in his face, pulled his beard, made fun of him, and then went and put him on a cross between two criminals, just like he was a criminal. You know, that cross was made for Barabbas. It was made for Barabbas. And I told you Sunday night that little story. And Jesus gets up on the cross and he says, Father, forgive them. That's the Jesus that I serve today. Father, forgive them. Father, forgive me. 7 things Jesus said while he was on the cross. He told John to take care of his mother. Darkness fell. Now, he went on the cross. I want y'all to remember this Friday. Get up Friday morning, think somewhere about 9 o'clock, Jesus is on the cross. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he's still on the cross, but it got dark. It got dark. There was an earthquake. The temple curtain, which was really, really thick curtain that only the priest could go behind, was torn in half. Do y'all know what the reason for that was? The only person that could go behind that curtain in the temple was the priest, once a year. Tied a rope around his leg in case he died back there, they could drag him out because they would not go behind that curtain. That curtain was where the priest met God. When that curtain was torn, Jesus died. That earthquake tore that curtain, and his death gave us free passage to God. No more curtain to keep us from God. All we have to do is believe in Jesus, and we don't need a curtain to talk to God, to fellowship with God. That curtain's gone. Here Jesus died on the cross. A very cruel death, not one that normal, like most people that died on the cross, they broke their legs, you know, if it was getting too close to dark and they weren't dead yet, but Jesus was dead. Satan was celebrating. Satan was happy. Satan thinks I finally won the battle. I finally got him right where I want him. Soldiers piercing his side. Witnesses to the crucifixion identified. You can read that in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then Joseph and Nicodemus took care of his body. You all remember Nicodemus went to Jesus at night. He was a Pharisee, very educated Pharisee, very high up, and he had a secret meeting with Jesus. And guess what happened that night? He got saved. He got saved. He believed in Jesus. He believed what Jesus said. And now we find him again. Here is you wouldn't believe it if you'd have been living there, that here is a Pharisee that's a high up officer helping Jesus' body get to the grave. Now, let me tell you, there's a lot of stories written about that, of why they did it. And don't believe any of them except him and Joseph. They believed in Jesus, and they took Jesus to the grave, and they put him in the tomb. and a stone was rolled in front of the tomb entrance. And we're going to stop right there tonight because Sunday morning is coming. It's Friday. It's Friday night there, but Sunday morning is coming. Most important day to me of the year. Sunday morning is going to get here. Now, I might not be here when it gets here. You might not be here when it gets here. None of us might be here when it gets here. We might get raptured out this Easter. Wouldn't that be great? Go celebrate Easter in heaven. We don't know, do we? But what we do know is what happened during this week. And we do know what's going to happen Sunday morning. As in a story we need to keep to ourselves, it's a story we need to share with the world. This world we live in today needs Jesus. They need to hear this story over and over again. I've heard it, I started going to church when I was 6 years old that I can remember. I actually went before then because they told me they took me to church. But when I remember 6 years old, and I've been told this story every year. I participated for 5 or 6 years as a disciple in a play of this story. And it was so real. I cried every play we had. Every one of it touched my heart. Especially when Mary started crying at the cross and we were over there in the dark. You could hear her just, I'm gonna tell you what, we had a Mary that could really boo-hoo. And it would just, give you chill bumps to know that this is a true story. It's not a fairy tale. If it would have been, I'm gonna end with this because I got 2 minutes. If it would have been a fairy tale or something somebody could prove for 2,000 years, it would have already been, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight. They can't disprove it. They can't, nobody. Theologians, scholars, atheists said they don't believe in God. But they hadn't disproved it. There's not a God. They just say they don't believe in God. I don't believe in atheists. So there you go. That's what I tell them. They say, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in atheists. Because I believe if you're put to the test and you can be crying out to somebody. But while Jesus was praying, there was one comment he made, and I got it highlighted right here in Luke chapter 22, verse 43. Then an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. So Jesus was praying. Jesus had just asked, Father, if it's your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. He was in such agony on that prayer. He knew what was going to happen to him. He knew the pain that he was going to have to go through, but he could have quit. He could have backed off any time, but he didn't. But that verse 43, then an angel appeared to him from where? Heaven, strengthening him, give him strength. Did you know the angel appears from heaven today and strengthens you? He really does. They really do. All it did to Jesus, according to verse 44, while he was in agony, he prayed more earnestly. He got strength, so he prayed more. Instead of he got strength and get up and leave, no, he got strength and he prayed even more earnestly. And then sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. He knew. But now, we've gone through the story and we put him in the tomb tonight. Sunday's coming. Any questions or comments?
I got one comment.
Go ahead.
And it's just a statement. Some churches don't believe they all believe in once saved, always saved, no backsliding, no son.
I know.
But don't that in John, Luke, when you read that, where he said, I have prayed for thee, talking about Peter, that thy faith fail not, and when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. Don't it sound like he sort of backslid said right there?
He did
But
backslide.
he said when you're converted, he means when you come back to me.
When
That
you
to
come
me
back.
proves that you can backslide. I mean, you ain't supposed to, but if you do.
It's funny you said that because this morning when my alarm clock went off, I was listening to a preacher and his sermon was, if Jesus comes while you're backsliding, are you still going to heaven? So he's getting that once saved, always saved. And the Free Will Baptists, you know, we believe that nobody can come and take your salvation away from you. You can give it up. But the only way you would give it up, is to do the unforgivable sin, and that's tell God you don't believe in him no more, you don't want to have anything to do with him, you don't even believe there is a God. Now, you just lost your salvation, but nobody took it from you, you gave it up. I got accused one time of once saved, always saved, but there's so many scriptures. That guy was naming 23 scriptures in the Bible that tells about your salvation, and nobody's going to take it away from you. And he was actually not condoning, not saying you need to, it's okay if you backslide, you need to fight from backslide, but if you backslide and Jesus comes back, you're already saved, you give your life to Christ. He said he ain't leaving backsliders behind. You're gonna pay the price, but you ain't gonna stay down here. There's too many scriptures that says that you're going to heaven if you believe on Jesus Christ. And that was a good question. Are you going to heaven if you're backsliding? The rapture happens to happen while you're backsliding. Think about it, and then go look at all the scriptures that says no one will take them away from me. Nobody, no nothing. The only way is you can give up the salvation yourself.
Best thing to do is not backslide.
Best thing to do is not backslide. That's right. That's right. But that was a good. I'm glad you brought that up because it just popped right up. What the first thing I heard this morning when I woke up was my devotion, and that's what he was talking about was backsliding. Backsliding Christians. Any other comments?
I got one quick question.
All right. Tomorrow's question day.
For those who aren't here tonight, now, when it talks about Peter cutting off Malchus's ear,
Mm-hmm.
isn't there just one book in the Bible where it says he puts it back on?
Yeah, it's in one of
It's
them.
in
It's only one time in the whole gospel.
all
It's not
four.
in the same, it's not in the same one right there.
All four Gospels tell about him cutting his ear off,
Yeah.
but one of them. Look at John 18 real quick. Hang on, and I might be wrong, but that's where I'm going with it. John 18. Let's see. Let's pray in Gethsemane. Watch and pray. Matthew. I got to get through here. He's praying right on. I'll be there in a minute. Where was it at?
It might be John 18:10,
18.
but I may be wrong.
Here it is in John 18, verse 5. Now, this may not be there, but I finally got to that part, and this is when Jesus said, I am he. And now when he had said them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. That's what I was talking about a while ago. And then he asked again, who you seeking? And let's see. Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, struck the high priest's servant, cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus, and he told him to put his sword back. And that's as far as John went with it. So it won't John. I think John's the only one that mentions the Malchus's name, but I may be wrong there too. Let's see. John, nope, that was the last one.
What was your question?
Luke.
I think there's only one book that says that one gospel that says that he